and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football. It is Thursday, October 26th. Today's show is presented by Geico. Insurance can be hard, guys. That's why Geico makes it easy with 24/7 claim service and on-the-go policy info in the app. It is easy to Geico. Every Thursday, I am joined by my friend Field Yates. Field, it's just you and I hanging out here.
Good morning. I thought I heard, was I sensing a hello to start the show right there?
Hello.
I thought I heard like maybe a half of a syllable of it.
Bit, yeah.
Okay. It is a busy Thursday, Daniel.
Yes,
it is a crazy Thursday, but always fun to have our Thursday night football preview and everything that you do. The first half of our week preview show is just you and I. Always fun to hang out here. And it always feels a little bit odd coming back to this side of the studio in this set.
This side set.
Yeah.
This is where I lived for so long. People don't know this,
home,
but like this was my home for a really long time as the producer while you guys sat over on the regular set.
And we're talking like 10 feet away. Like
Yes,
this is not that far, but it feels
far.
like a different vibe entirely.
Yeah, that's how this works, right? That's how. Listen, I'm all about being the vibe master here, so I'm gonna take care of you.
Okay,
Don't
thank
worry
you.
about it, Phil.
Yeah, let's go.
We got Thursday night football. We got some injuries we are going to talk about. Make sure people are all set. We also have, like you said, our part one preview of the Week 8 slate. So let's dive in and talk about some of this injury stuff, Field.
Yeah, normally, Daniel, we're not going to be the show that does like a daily injury up-to-date, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because sometimes there's not a whole lot that changes from one day to the next. But when the MVP of fantasy football is not at practice on Wednesday, it does catch your attention. So what do we learn about Miami yesterday?
I was just going to say, so Tyreek Hill, the MVP right now of fantasy football, missed practice yesterday with a hip injury. There is a chance that he could miss this game against the New England Patriots. As a fantasy manager, if I've got Tyreek Hill, Field, I'm starting him, right? If he plays, you start him. If he doesn't play, and that's something that we're going to continue to monitor, we'll watch tomorrow. Hopefully we get some more practice updates. And FF Now on Sunday morning, we're going to watch that. How is it that you would approach this Dolphins wide receiving core?
Well, so here's a couple of pieces of context. If people didn't follow this one that closely, is Jaylen Waddle was asked whether Tyreek Hill's going to play on Sunday. And I feel like
funny.
I could be wrong here. I could be wrong. I feel like a lot of times teammates err on the side of things along these lines. Like, I bet he will. That's my guy. I'm expecting him to. Or like, be surprised if he doesn't.
It's like a throwaway line.
It's a throwaway. It's like, you want to make the other team think the player is going to play at the very least. And instead, Jaylen Waddle said, that's above my pay grade.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Tua, and I saw this, several beat reporters, the first one that I saw that tweeted about it was Adam Beasley, now at PFN, who talked about how he said, Tua's answer when asked about Tyreek suggested this could be a real injury, not like a maintenance day that is just going to be a nothing burger by Thursday's practice. He's going to show back up, be a full participant, and we're full steam ahead for Sunday. He mentioned how at one point I think Tua said something to the effect of, when we get Tyreek Hill back down the line. Oof. So with the Dolphins, Week 8, they played the Patriots. Week 9 in Germany against the Chiefs, and then Week 10 they're off for a bye. I don't want to get it too far ahead of myself, but I made a mental note yesterday of the possibility that he might be out until after that Week 10 bye. Back on track here in terms of what it means, unless you wanted to follow up.
Well, that sort of sounds like what you're describing what the Lions did with David Montgomery, where it's like, can we take this time? Because that bye week is just in our purview, so maybe we can make it. Until we get there.
Yep. And by the way, Mike McDaniel spoke before the team's practice yesterday. He did not alert the media that Tyreek Hill was not going to practice, so we haven't yet heard from him. Maybe we get a bit more clarity today. In terms of what it means for the Dolphins offense, there are a few questions that we got to ask. First of all, Jaylen Waddle, we think, is going to play. That back injury that took him out of the game last week, and then he went back into the game, did not cost him practice yesterday. I think Waddle gets a little bit of a boost here because you would think the targets do go up for Jaylen Waddle as well.
Yep.
But is there is there going to be a Dolphins wide receiver that emerges virtually out of nothing so far this season and takes on a legit fantasy relevant role?
I don't see one.
It's hard for me to pinpoint exactly who it would be because they kind of relied upon a smorgasbord of wide receivers not named Jaylen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. And when I say relied upon, I mean very minimally because pretty much all the targets are going to Tyreek Hill mostly and then some to Jaylen Waddle as well. It's some sort of Braxton Berrios, Cedric Wilson, Chase Claypool dart throw, maybe even River Craycraft, who I think they opened the 21-day practice window up to yesterday. So We'll talk about this maybe in long shots on Sunday morning in Fantasy Football Now with Adam Schefter. That would probably be the only scenario in which I am playing a Dolphins wide receiver not named Jaylen Waddle on Sunday. And Daniel, it does make me think a little bit more about Tua's value in the event that there's no Tyreek Hill, because not to take away anything from Tua, this is the case with any quarterback that loses the best wide receiver on the planet.
Absolutely.
The passing game is just that much less potent.
Well, and when he doesn't make up for that with his legs in some way, then there is a part of that where it's like, okay, how are we going to find this value still without those explosive wide receivers?
And I'm going to keep Tua inside my top 10, even if Tyreek Hill is out or very close to the top 10. Like, I still would be starting Tua. He's played extremely well against Bill Belichick defenses. The Dolphins, with Tua as their starter, have never lost to the Patriots.
Really?
Never. Which it's a testament to how great Tua has been in several of those games.
Wow.
But he did have a relatively quiet game when the two teams played all the way back in week 2. So maybe expectations drop not just because of the matchup, but obviously because of the player involved as well. Meanwhile, Raheem Mostert also missed practice yesterday due to an ankle injury. I don't know if because Tyreek has been so good, most of the reporters' attention was paid
Just
to
focused
Tyreek,
on that,
and they didn't sort of follow up as much on Raheem Mostert. Right now, the concern level seems a lot lower for Raheem Mostert than it does Tyreek Hill. But I would do this right now. If Jeff Wilson Jr. is available in your league, and you're listening to this live or right when it goes up, before we have more clarity on Raheem Mostert's status, I'd grab Jeff Wilson Jr. right now.
Available in 57% of ESPN fantasy leagues.
Because if Mostert's out, Devon Achane's still a few weeks away from being able to return.
Sounds like no Tyreek Hill.
Sounds like maybe no Tyreek Hill. I would want Jeff Wilson Jr.
Very
in my
condensed.
lineup. Yeah. So certainly one to monitor there in Miami. It's the MVP of the NFL so far amongst non-quarterbacks is Tyreek Hill, and certainly the MVP of fantasy football. So this is a major one, Daniel. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't just like bury it until Friday. I know Stefania will have more tomorrow, but this is a potentially significant like fantasy landscape altering injury. If he's out for 2 or 3 weeks, I feel like every league that I'm playing in, the person who has Tyreek Hill is within the top 4. And that team is obviously going to have to find some ways to overcome a loss if he's unavailable for 2 or 3 weeks.
I am in a league where I have Tyreek Hill.
And you're in first place?
And I have the 4th most points in the league, and I'm 3-4.
I know.
And it's just, I can't. So like, I need Tyreek Hill to be here as a part of this, by the way. Like this is going to be a big part of it.
I mean, he's been by far the best player in fantasy amongst wide receivers.
Easily.
By far.
Yeah.
And when you factor in the injuries to Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp missing time, and the regression to Devontae Adams in recent weeks, like it's been the Tyreek Hill show.
But how much this is where I'm so frustrated this year. All right. If Tyreek Hill misses time, and especially if he misses, how many superstars have missed multiple games?
Oh God.
Like if you start at the top, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp,
Cooper Kupp.
you had CMC. Is it CMC?
CMC has not yet missed a game. Nope.
Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce has been banged up.
Missed a game, yeah. It's been a lot.
There's been a bunch of these superstars. Nick Chubb, obviously. So, that's one of those things where it's...
So, who was the right pick at number 1 overall? I guess
Nobody.
CMC is still the right answer for number 1 pick overall. Not that Tyreek wouldn't have been a great number 1 overall pick. He was just discussed in that vein a little bit less during the preseason.
Yeah.
But if he misses time, obviously that changes
a whole bunch.
A lot in fantasy football. So, we are hoping he doesn't miss time. But based off of the comments yesterday, I thought it was important enough for us to send a flare up now about the possibility of Tyreek not playing in week 8.
Not the only injury that we want to talk about, though, because this is another one that I think is fairly big field. Brock Purdy in the concussion protocol. And here's what was interesting about this as I was reading up about it last night.
Yep.
This did not happen, and they did not know about it in the game. They were flying home on the team airplane, and that's when Brock Purdy started to experience symptoms.
Yeah.
So once they got home, they started to get him into the concussion protocol. Now he's there. This is a very short amount of time to potentially turn around and be able to play this week. So understanding Brock Purdy came in maybe a little bit later to the concussion protocol than what we had expected, not knowing that when it happened on Sunday.
Yep.
If he is out, and you got Sam Darnold under center, which I am going to now plan on. If I roster a 49er in fantasy, I'm planning on Sam Darnold being under center. How does that change your outlook for them, or would you move anybody down?
Not that much.
No?
Not that much. I mean, so first of all, we're not going to have Deebo Samuel this week, according to Kyle Shanahan. Yep. So you're talking about George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, and that's about
CMC.
it.
So the same guys that we just said yesterday, you start them regardless.
Yeah, but also think about this. one of my favorite random stats that bubbles up on Twitter, I don't know, like once a year, is that the most passing yards in a player's first 16 starts in NFL history is held by Patrick Mahomes. That's the record.
Okay.
Number 2 on that list, Nick Mullins.
What?
Playing for the 49ers.
Really?
So the system is just so friendly. And before you think that I'm taking away from Brock Purdy, I'm not, okay? Two things can be true at the same time. It can be a quarterback-friendly system, and Brock can be playing very, very, very good football. But Sam Darnold, who I get it if there are people out there that are sick of hearing about the potential of Sam Darnold, right? Because it's been coming out of the draft, playing for the Jets, playing for the Panthers, right? It was always like Sam Darnold, it's going to click soon enough. And then it hasn't fully clicked at the NFL level for any prolonged period of time. Mm-hmm. But in a short-term basis, in an offense that has seen more quarterbacks put up statistically relevant Sundays, Sam Darnold, I think, can be good enough to handle whatever it is the 49ers need him to handle that will also lead to George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk having comparable outlooks to where they have been with Brock Purdy under center.
I think I'm totally with you, Field. And here's the thing that's interesting to me. Sam Darnold's been in the league for 5 years. He's still only 26 years old.
That's crazy.
Like, it's weird because I think about Sam Darnold being like, oh, he's probably pushing like 29 at this point. But it's like, no, he came in as a 21-year-old.
Yep.
And this is so hard for me because it's like, I know people take shots at Sam Darnold. His career was with the Jets and the Panthers.
It has been.
He hasn't gotten a ton of help.
Yeah.
But at the same point, he hasn't always helped himself. This is a situation where, given everything that you said, this is a really nice system for a quarterback to be able to live in and just have a nice, safe floor. He doesn't need to go out and win this game like I think a lot of times in his past teams he needed to do. He just needs to play within his means. That's what's perfect about this 49er system.
Yeah, by the way, I keep getting notifications on my watch and phone. It keeps me, is somebody tweeting about Tyreek Hill. So if you see me checking my phone, that's exactly why, just as a heads up here. So, yeah. Anyways, yes, I agree with you on Sam Darnold. I had Purdy, though. If Purdy does play, and he has not yet been ruled out, he did participate in the team's walkthrough yesterday.
And there is a chance that Coach Shanahan said there is a chance that he could still get through the protocol by Sunday.
Yep. And as Stefania has hammered over our head a million times before, there's no timeline on these things. They take as long as they need to take. But they have been not that many instances of a player returning from 1 week to the next with a concussion this season. But Purdy would be inside my top 10 if he does play.
Wow.
Yeah, he's other than last week. And so not to like just make excuses for every player, but last week was bad from Purdy. 2 weeks ago, that game against the Browns was like crazy rain, and the Browns are gnarly on defense. So Purdy, but prior to that, had been excellent for fantasy purposes.
I also have him inside the top 10. I just realized that as I look at it right here.
Although that one's obviously subject to change if we get any more information on Purdy's availability later on today.
Sam Darnold would not just fall right into the top 10 if he does play for him.
He would not. No, he'd be like, I don't know, quarterback 17, 18 for me. He would not be a streaming option, not be a starting option for me for this week.
All right, we're going to talk about Thursday Night Football. Preview this Bills-Bucks game in a second, but first, Field Yates.
Home, auto, prize sports memorabilia. Whatever you need to protect, Geico can help get you covered. And with the award-winning Geico mobile app, you can get 24/7 claim support and on-the-go policy access. It's easy to Geico. Go to geico.com today.
You smell that, guys? That's the scent of fresh turf and freshly cracked Dr. Pepper, which can only mean one thing. It is college football season. So block off your Saturdays and swipe a sweet DP from the mini fridge. DP stands for Dr. Pepper because there's a new season of high kicks, long throws, and Fansville commercial breaks to carry you all the way to the West Coast games. That's right. The fans are back. And this year, things are heating up. We're talking more hot takes, more heartbreak, more layers of face paint. Get ready to drink in all the drama this season with the help of the most delicious college football tradition there is, Dr. Pepper, the one fans deserve. All right.
I just checked, by the way. I do not see any updates on Twitter right now on Raheem Mostert and Tyreek Hill and others. So we'll continue to monitor it throughout the show. But Tyler, our producer, will let me know if we hear anything on those players. But for now, we are sticking with the information that we shared about 5 minutes ago.
Awesome. Thursday Night Football. We got the Bucks and the Bills here tonight. Let's start with the Buffalo Bills.
Does this feel like a weird game for some reason to you? In the sense that I don't feel like these teams play each other that often.
So that I definitely think. And I think it feels like
I kind of like that for Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, this one's different. The only thing that I wish is that, and this is, we've had a lot of complaints with the NFL.
Yeah.
But like, I loved being able to see the creamsicles before. Like, why not have it be on an island game like this?
Like that
Thursday
call,
Night
actually.
Football. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I actually was thinking about this morning related to jerseys. Are there like 3 or 4 teams whose current uniforms you like enough that you're like, just wear them every week and I'm totally fine with it?
Week.
Like, I'm cool with it. Like, I think some of the best uniforms in the NFL right now, the Raiders' simplicity is just always awesome to me.
Yeah.
I love the Dolphins uniforms. I think the Dolphins, especially their aqua outfit, is just terrific. They are wearing their throwbacks this weekend, though, which are also very nice.
Yes.
I think the 49ers are a classic look.
They are very classic. I love the Seahawks. I'm a big fan of that highlighter green.
Okay, so you're on an island with that take right
I'm one
there.
of the other ones, yeah, because not everyone is into that.
But they're bringing back their throwbacks this weekend.
Dude, I love the throwbacks, like the Dave Craig throwbacks. Like,
yeah,
that's
so
what I'm looking for.
that's why I like when they bring back the throwbacks, you're like, okay, so even if you like the highlighter greens, they do not hold a candle to the throwbacks.
You're
so
right.
anyways, yeah, those are some. I think I'm trying to think of others that I just like. Solid, like hard to mess up those uniforms. Man.
I mean, it's tough because a lot of teams keep
Packers
it
are
very
also
simple.
cool.
I was just going to say the Packers and the Bears, I feel like they've had the same uniforms
Forever.
for like the last 60 years.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right, speaking of the last 60 years.
Yep.
I don't know.
Just
I don't know
whatever.
what the transition was there.
But that's actually like that's your thing now. Is that like you just make a nonsensical transition that it actually works?
Well, you sort of find out if it works in the middle of it. I think I'm the Michael Scott where sometimes I start a sentence and see if I can figure out where it's going halfway through. You know what I mean?
100%. I love that play. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk Josh Allen because this guy is amazing. 20 fantasy points or more in 5 of his 7 games this year. It seems silly to say that you would not start Josh Allen. I'm starting him this week against the Bucs field. I know you are too. If there was one thing that you were looking at within this matchup for Josh Allen, there have been a couple of down weeks, not for him necessarily, but for the Bills as a whole. I want to see him be able to command this team in a way that I know that Josh Allen can actually do because we've had some tough matchups here.
Yeah, I would argue this, and this is not a fantasy thing, but it's tied to fantasy, is I would argue that maybe the Bills would be better served to, and the Bills' offensive staff has forgotten more football than I'll ever know. I'm not trying to argue otherwise.
Yeah.
My opinion would be that I feel like a few more Josh Allen runs would be healthy for this offense. It seems like teams are basically saying to Buffalo, you're not going to beat us way down the field. And because Josh is running the football so infrequently, they can just play more coverage underneath than they had in the past. Because when Josh was running the ball so much, you're constantly fearing a 25-yard run from Josh Allen matched by a 25-yard pass to Stephon Diggs or somebody else. Yeah. So that would obviously benefit Josh Allen's rushing ability, but just to speak to how brilliant he is for fantasy purposes, despite less rushing this season compared to last year, he's still QB4 for me this week. He and Stephon Diggs are the lineup locks of all lineup locks for this Buffalo offense.
Yep. Outside of those two guys, when you look at Gabe Davis, no teams on a bye. And we're going to say this a lot. I said this to you before the show. I'm going to say this sentence a lot. With no teams on a bye, there's just too many other wide receivers I would rather play than Gabe Davis.
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of your guy. And when Daniel is saying, I'm out on Gabe Davis, like the touchdown streak has come to an end.
Yep.
He had 1 catch this past week. This is not held for fantasy purposes, but I do believe there are people in the NFL whose role is more important than the box score says. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is like unquestionably that guy for Kansas City. Like just the run really fast and hope that teams account for you allows them to do a lot of stuff underneath. I wonder if there's some of that with Gabe Davis for Buffalo. Of course, he's prone to like a 2-touchdown game because he's Gabe Davis, but I have him as wide receiver 49 tonight. I would not be starting Gabe Davis in week 8.
If there was a pass catcher I was going to start instead of Gabe Davis, it would be Dalton Kincaid now with Dawson Knox out and not going to be here. That's a guy that is a top 10 tight end for me. So outside of Stephon Diggs, as far as pass catchers go, Dalton Kincaid is the other guy that I want in this offense.
I'm excited that America gets to see him in a standalone game tonight because he's a good player. Now, a lot of what the Bills did last week with Dalton Kincaid was just dump the ball off to him. Like it wasn't, field stretching or seam stretching plays in which he's gathering, 20 to 25 yards per catch, but dump offs count just the same.
That's
and if he piles up 8 catches for 67 yards, you'll take that every day of the week. And with no Dawson Knox tonight, to your point, he should play a ton. So Dalton Kincaid, also a lineup lock for me amongst tight ends.
When you're looking at these running backs, it is now down to 2. It is James Cook and Latavius Murray. James Cook, the obvious guy that you and I are both starting. I have him just outside. I'm actually at running back 20. I was going to say just, but right around there. So you have him just inside the top 20. I've got him at running back 20. I want to have more confidence in this guy.
Totally, yeah.
Part of this is the way that this team is using him. I'm worried Latavius Murray is going to keep siphoning away, not just regular touches, but those goal line touches that I don't think James Cook is getting. And this is a good Bucs front defense.
Yeah, it's going to be rare for him to get goal line utilization for 2 reasons. Josh Allen
and
Murray.
Latavius Murray.
Right,
both.
so both of those guys. Last week, Josh Allen had a rushing touchdown. I believe it was a quarterback sneak from the 1. If they have the ball first and goal from the 3, and they have a chance to sub out, my guess is that James Cook off the field, Latavius Murray on the field. So that's going to decrease the value. The fact that Latavius Murray is going to have some number of carries also going to decrease the value. But James Cook, really efficient pass catcher. Big play, the efficiency as a runner, still awesome as it was last year. It's even better this season. So I've got him as running back 19. So like you, inside the top 20, which in a 10-team league means he has a lineup block.
What about on the other side of this game?
Yeah.
If we talk about Baker Mayfield. Is he someone that you would consider starting? Have you seen enough from Baker to be like, yeah, he might be a starter in a 10-team league?
In a 10-team league, no. 12 or 14 league, I would consider it.
Consideration.
14-team league, this Bills defense is still, I still will have fear facing this Bills defense every single week until proven otherwise. But injuries have kind of caught up to them a little bit this year. Matt Milano, maybe the best coverage linebacker in the NFL, makes a legit difference in terms of how quarterbacks perform. Out for the season. Daquan Jones, Tre'Davious White, out for the season. Von Miller has not really played that much for the Bills since coming back from injury. I think it's if my math is correct, something like 47 snaps in 3 games.
Oh, wow.
So Von, this is an ACL he's coming back from, right? And I would imagine there are certainly some exceptions, but I would think that, guys in their mid to late 30s are probably facing a steeper uphill battle than a 22-year-old coming back from an ACL tear. So it feels like this Bills defense a little bit less imposing. Baker Mayfield's quarterback 12 for me this week. The connection with Mike Evans is really good, and this team has been inefficient running the football. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But yeah, I've got Baker he's been fine this year. He hasn't been brilliant, but he has certainly not been terrible. He's held onto the job almost halfway through the season, which I think some people were skeptical that would even be the case.
Yeah. Bills have allowed 76 fantasy points to quarterbacks over 7 games.
76, you said?
Yes. So they're averaging
10
that's
very
fantasy points
bad.
a game.
But maybe, some recent injuries, right?
That's that's what I'm saying. You just described reasons why this Bills defense maybe could be a little more susceptible to things that we haven't seen so far this year.
Yeah, think about some of the games they've played recently, right? So they lose to the Patriots, and Mac Jones, I think, had almost 20 fantasy points, right? And played well last week. That was a very impressive performance from Mac Jones. And then was the week prior to that? That wasn't.
So you had New England, and then it was the Giants where they had Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah, Tyrod Taylor, which backup quarterback who didn't do a whole lot, but
Yikes.
What do you expect? And then Trevor Lawrence. Remember that was the game though that he fumbled 2 times, where it was he ends up as quarterback 16. If he doesn't have 2 atypical fumbles, it was a quarterback 10 maybe.
Yeah, he's back in a better spot.
Again, you're still going to fear the Bills defense in a lot of weeks, but if there were ever a time where there's a little bit a touch less confidence, right now would be that week, just because all the injuries. It's just really hard right now to, at some point, no matter how good your roster is, if 4 of your, I don't know, probably 7 most impactful defensive players are either out for the year or hardly playing in the case of Von Miller,
you're going to have to.
It's just hard to be as dominant of a defense. It just is.
Yep.
So anyways, Baker's quarterback 12 is my takeaway.
All right. For these wide receivers, I've got Mike Evans just outside my top 10. He's a clear-cut, set it and forget it. Wide receiver 2. He's a lineup lock for me. The question mark is really about Chris Godwin.
Inside my top 25 this week, here are the things that are going well for Chris Godwin recently. Over the past 3 weeks, 20 catches, 30 targets.
Hey, that's
so he's
great.
seeing the volume we're looking for, right?
Yeah.
6, 8, and 6 catches for Chris Godwin during that span. The thing that Chris Godwin has not yet done this year, score a touchdown. And this actually kind of happened last year a little bit too. I mean, the entire Bucs offense was all over the place last year, but touchdowns were hard to come by during Tom Brady's final season for Chris Godwin. So I've got him outside my top 20, but inside my top 20. I believe it's wide receiver 23 to be specific there. 30 catches for 398 yards so far for Chris Godwin. So nearly 13 yards a catch for him. So he's been solid.
Did you do that math in your head, or did you have that ahead of the?
I know it's. I saw the average was 12.5.
Okay.
I'm actually wondering now if I maybe gave him I think it might be 32 catches for 398 yards.
Okay. All right.
I was doing some research this
a little
morning.
bit of math, yeah.
Yes, he is a consideration for sure. in 10-team leagues.
By the way, he's got the questionable tag on him right now. He had a neck injury, but seems very good to go. Not worried about him not playing tonight.
I believe they said yesterday, full steam ahead. He was a full participant in practice. During these short weeks, teams are very, very conservative with how much they actually practice players because it's really, first of all, it's not really practice. Second of all, you're more focused on rehab than you are running a bunch of routes when you've got, especially when you're the road team like Tampa, and you've got basically 48 hours before you fly to your game.
All right, so this is my question. I'm so glad you brought it up this way. The road team. Tampa coming into Buffalo. Rachaad White as the running back has struggled. This running game in general has just struggled, but the Buffalo Bills are bottom 10 in fantasy points to running backs. This is actually not a bad matchup with the way that it stacks up here. How are you looking at Rachaad White? Because it sort of feels like, all right, here's a sort of like movable force, but it's against another force that is not doing a great job at the same time.
All right, so I've got him as RB21. That's the headline there. So he's close to a lineup lock. The things that are working in his favor, the matchup you mentioned, and the Bills have not been as sturdy defensively against the run as they have been against the pass for much of this year. Moreover, Keyshawn Vaughn was starting to see a little bit more work as recently as 2 games ago.
Don't love that.
Had a fumble last week, though, that led to it felt like more and more of Rachaad White. The team did activate Chase Edmonds from IR. He, I would expect, would play tonight, but it still feels like Rachaad White is the clear-cut starter, the first in line on most drives, and good enough in the passing game as well that Rachaad White's still very much usable for me. Of all the players that are kind of hovering between like RB 15 and 20, Alexander Mattison, and Miles Sanders, who's probably a little bit lower, are kind of the 3 that I have earmarked for like a little bit nervous that the current grip on their job could loosen over the next month or so. But for now, I'm still treating Rachaad White as the Buccaneers' clear-cut starter and RB21 as a result of that.
Over the last 2 weeks, Keyshawn Vaughn does have 10 touches. For a total of 16 yards.
Right. Yeah. Inefficiency is kind of the name of the game for this Bucs running game.
It really is.
Yeah, unfortunately. Which
is not great. All right, and I really think that's going to be it. Do you want to pick this game? There's no one else that I'm starting from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, with no teams on a bye, that pool is just shorter, so we're looking for premium plays.
If you're feeling frisky, K-Dotton. But that would be like if you're, he's had a couple of reasonable weeks recently. But I think there are probably 10 better options at tight end this week.
I would agree
with
that.
Than K-Dotton. Yep.
Who are you taking in this game, Bills or Bucs?
Taking the Bills. Taking the Bills. And this is an important one for Buffalo, though. This is a game that, like, Buffalo needs to be themselves tonight. They need to be the real version of the Bills because inconsistency is, unfortunately, right now, a trait that is associated with the Bills. They're so talented. Their very best can be awesome. They beat the Dolphins by 28 points. They can be excellent. They also can lose games that you don't think they should lose. And over the past 2 weeks, they squeaked out a win against Tyrod Taylor and the Giants. They lose to the Patriots. They got to get back on track. It starts tonight against the Buccaneers. I do think Buffalo answers the bell.
I am going to go with Buffalo as well.
Okay.
I just don't want to take Tampa Bay on the road. I still think that Buffalo is a better team and gets back on track here.
I do too. I think it's something I feel like Buffalo's got, I don't know about sleeping giant potential.
Ooh.
Injuries have really added up for them, but I just feel like that team's better than 4-3 indicates.
All right, let's move ahead and talk our Week 8 preview, part 1. Game preview. All right, let's start with the Bengals taking on the 49ers. Field there is a lineup lock here for me. It's Jamar Chase. We're not going to talk about him. I'm just going to say you're starting him this week. Joe Burrow becomes a real question mark because we saw a very nice game from him against Arizona in Week 5, 23.3 fantasy points. And every other game has been still very difficult. Now he gets the San Francisco 49ers. The bye week, I am hoping, proves to be very helpful with him being able to get healthy, get right, more mobility within the pocket. But understanding all of those things and how he's looked and the bye week, how are you approaching Joe Burrow in Week 8?
I agree with your Jamar Chase take, by the way.
Okay.
But Joe Burrow, I have him as quarterback 13. And I might move him up a couple slots by the time we get to... I kind of close the book on rankings after roster moves on Saturday at 4 p.m.
Okay.
Until we have the subsequent reporting from Shefty and all that. But I don't do a ton of tweaks after, let's call it 4 or 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. I think there's a chance that Burrow moves up a couple of spots because this 49ers defense has left a little bit to be desired in recent weeks. A little bit, not a ton, but they did not pressure Kirk Cousins like they thought they would last week. This is an essential week, though, for Joe Burrow. This one matters a lot. I get it. They all matter. But there are a couple of reasons why this one matters in particular. You mentioned the bye week.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, is kind of, if his calf doesn't get dramatically better and he does not look more like himself with basically 7 days of doing nothing, then do I ever expect it to look a lot better
This season. Yeah.
Moreover, if they win, it's a huge win, 4-3, right in the mix in the AFC North, regardless of what happens with the other teams.
Yep.
If you lose, 3-4, Baltimore could be 6-2 by the end of the weekend. That would be 2.5 games back. Cincinnati would be in that circumstance.
Yikes.
And Cincinnati plays Buffalo next week.
Oh.
I'm almost positive on that one. Week 9. I'm almost positive.
Buffalo.
Yeah.
At home in Cincinnati.
Yeah. This one feels important to me because it feels like it, not only for fantasy purposes, but for real life purposes, it kind of can be the pivot point for the Cincinnati season.
Yeah.
And I think if it's the real life pivot point for the Cincinnati season, it'll correlate with the real life fantasy pivot point as well.
Oof.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense. I'm still nervous because I felt like I wanted to be excited to trust him. I saw him look better, right? He's moving better. I need to see this entire team start to perform well because it's not just Joe Burrow. I think part of this is also, and not to skip ahead, like I have Joe Burrow as running back or quarterback 12, so I would probably start him in a 12-teamer.
Yeah.
But it's not just Joe Burrow that needed to benefit from that from the bye. Tee Higgins as well. We have not seen Tee Higgins be the guy that we thought he was going to be. I need him to be able to get to a point where he can come back and eventually be something within this offense because right now it's just been Jamar Chase.
This is a too difficult to imagine that it's real that I had to go back and reread it stat. Tee Higgins has 5 or fewer fantasy points in 4 of his 5 games he's played this year.
Absurd.
Tee Higgins, who there was a time this offseason where I wondered whether he might have signed a $25 million per year extension, which, by the way, he still could end up getting a $20 to $25 or $27 million deal in free agency this upcoming offseason. He's super talented. You just wouldn't imagine that it could possibly take place in an offense that returns Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins, Tyler Boyd, offensive line they spent big on again this offseason. Yep. I've got him as wide receiver 27 this week. I don't want to totally dismiss the 49ers defense because of one not perfect game. And by the way, the 49ers were so not perfect last week. Mm-hmm. They allowed 22 points, right? Like that tells you something about how good the defense actually is. If we're calling a bad week, 22 points allowed.
Absolutely.
But it has not been for lack of volume with Tee Higgins. He's had multiple games with 8 targets that have been under 5 fantasy points. If he keeps getting that kind of volume, Daniel, it's going to be really hard for him to not get on track. But what a massive, massive, massive game this is for the entire Bengals offense.
Yep, I'm with you on that. Last one here, Joe Mixon.
Yeah.
You win on Joe Mixon here against the 49ers. They got a nice run defense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. That
it doesn't feel good about it, but like,
yeah. His RB20, his volume's off the charts, but God, like, just not, like, there's minimal big play efficiency whatsoever.
Yep.
I don't know if that's going to change. I'd be surprised if it does. Finding the end zone infrequently. I don't know, man. I'm still starting him.
Yeah.
I'll say this, though. Here's a good example of it. You and I play in this league together with Not Cool Keith.
Yep.
It's the Gasco League. We have a great group of people, 12 managers in total. And my team is kind of coming to the end of its run that was catalyzed by Christian McCaffrey. He's got a little bit of time left on his deal, but it felt to me like it was better to make a pivot. And so I made a deal. I traded away Christian McCaffrey. And I mentioned when I was alerting the group that Christian McCaffrey was on the board, available for trade, that Joe Mixon is also available for trade. Please send me your offers. I think I got 6 McCaffrey offers, and I've had 0 texts whatsoever about Joe Mixon. 0. And it's a salary cap league.
Yes, it is.
In which you can exceed, like, the amount that you can spend is in the actual, like, salary cap part is different than during the draft than you can have on your roster during the season.
Correct.
And people still aren't biting on Joe Mixon in the final year of his deal. Like, I don't need, like, I'm not looking for someone to trade me, like, I don't know, Jahmyr Gibbs in year 1 of his contract back.
Right.
Like, I would take a warm body for Joe Mixon right now in that league, and I can't get anything. So it's It's been uninspiring to say the least.
So just so fantasy managers understand, you're not the only one that feels crappy when you've got to play Joe Mixon right now. Like he's not one of those guys that gives you a lot of confidence, but there's too much volume. Some of these guys, there's just too much volume to not play him. And I'm still in that spot with Joe Mixon, just like you feel.
Just like Alexander Madison, guys like that. They're sort of in that same
Rachaad
category.
White, in that same area.
Yep.
Let's talk Ravens.
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson, you're starting. Mark Andrews, you're starting. I've got Zay Flowers as a starter. Really, the question for me is these running backs.
Yeah, and Daniel, I love to tell you that I have like a clear-cut, obvious, this is how it's going to go every single week assessment of things. I'm using last week as sort of instructive. Gus Edwards playing more than Justice Hill. Gus Edwards, who's got a better bet, I think, to find the end zone in short yardage / goal line situations.
Agreed.
So I've got him as RB23 against Arizona. Justice Hill as RB36. It might have been the best game of Gus Edwards, maybe not career, but in a long time last week. He had an 80-yard catch. Gus Edwards with an 80-yard catch. Who saw that coming? So I've got him as the higher-ranked running back amongst the Ravens. I feel like this team could just use like a little bit more clarity of that running back spot, though, in general.
Tell me about it. I mean, we came into this game, we came into this season, and it was like we were really excited about what potentially J.K. Dobbins could do. There was still some nervousness, but it feels like, when was the last time that these Ravens had a real running back?
Man,
was Ray Rice
for the full season? Sorry, I just ticked Daniel by mistake.
Like, was he the
probably
last?
Mark Ingram.
Okay,
who had that awesome year. I mean, he broke every
That's fair.
efficiency chart.
That's fair.
But that was probably it. Yeah.
It's been a
tough.
while.
It's been a while. It has been a while. So I've got Edwards ranked ahead of Justice Hill. But
Cardinals are a good matchup.
They are a good matchup. And this is a let's not mess around game for Baltimore. I believe very strongly this is an awesome team. They need to not let the good vibes from last week and the upcoming schedule beyond Arizona make them overlook Arizona. Assuming they play to their potential, this could be a big day for the entire backfield.
For what it is worth, career day for Gus Edwards last week against the Detroit Lions.
Heck yeah, baby.
Most fantasy points that he had ever had in his entire career, 21.4 fantasy points. So don't expect that moving forward. He has had one 20-point fantasy game in his entire career. It happened against my Detroit Lions because of an 80-yard catch. Thank you very much, Gus Edwards.
By the way, I just got a trade offer for Joe Mixon.
Yes!
Not cool, Keith. It's an IDP league.
Is he offering you an IDP player?
A safety. Rudy Ford.
Not cool, Keith.
I mean,
Come
that
on.
is actually not cool.
That's
and
so
Keith knows I
funny.
love him, but I mean, that's hey, in Keith's defense, it's the best offer I've got right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So-
right. Hey, speaking of not cool, Keith, he is a huge diehard Browns fan. He is our Browns fan here on the show. No Jerome Ford in that backfield right now. We talked about adding Kareem Hunt off of waivers. Hopefully people went out and did that. If you added him off of waivers this week against the Seahawks field, do you have him as a guy that you can start as an RB2 or a high-end flex play?
I'm a little bit lower than you are for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
Most importantly, the matchup.
Tough.
The Seahawks have all of a sudden become this gnarly run defense. They are just freaking awesome this year. Under 90 rush yards per game allowed. And with Seattle, they've had a couple of games in which they were either playing in shootouts or up a little bit bigger, but they've played some close games. This is not like a game script thing, right? Where like, I don't know, maybe Miami would be like the number one run defense because they're always up by so many points, right?
Right.
That's not the case with Seattle. Kareem Hunt also missed practice on Wednesday. So we'll have a big update there tomorrow if need be, but he's a little bit banged up. I get the sense he'll play for a couple of reasons. One, the Browns did not rule him out like they did Deshaun Watson yesterday.
I think that's going to change, for the record, that's going to change my Kareem Hunt ranking just a little bit. Because,
move him down?
Yeah, I'll move him down because when I did this ranking, it was, okay, if I think that Deshaun might be able to play, that's what I'm going to project. That's where he'd be at. Without Deshaun, I think this entire offense takes a hit.
Man, that tells you something.
Which is tough because the offense is already not great right now.
I was going to say, Deshaun hasn't exactly been having this unbelievable season.
There's just more upside with Deshaun than there is with anyone else.
No doubt about that. But the Browns haven't, and not cool Keith, who's watching the show, could probably correct me if I'm wrong here. They waived Deion Jackson on Saturday, maybe it was Monday. So the Browns don't have Deion Jackson in the backfield. It's basically Pierre Strong behind Kareem Hunt. I think probably a running back on the practice squad or two.
That's what I'm trying to look for.
So it's not like the Browns, to my knowledge, have like a bunch of extra available bodies that they will be turning to without Kareem Hunt. I feel like if they were more concerned about Hunt, they probably would have already made some moves at the beginning of the week to address their depth.
That's fair. I think that's a fair thing to say. I moved Kareem Hunt just now while you were talking about this. I moved him down to running back 25, which is that where you have him?
I'm
as
at
well?
26. So yeah, same spot. So again, I said earlier in the week, to be very clear and consistent, if I'm adding a running back this week and starting him, it's Kareem Hunt.
Yes. Still feel that way.
Yeah, I still feel that way. Against the other options that we talked about. Now, if Deontay Foreman, if there's no Roschon Johnson, it might be much closer. But based off of my belief that Roschon Johnson would play, he's still my favorite add, and he did play much better last week. But the inefficiency, the Seahawks run defense, those lead to an RB26 ranking.
Yep. What about for the Los Angeles Rams? Field?
Yeah.
Because we're in a spot we saw Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman take some time.
Yep.
They both had touches in the backfield this week. They get the Dallas Cowboys. If there's one person that I'm going to default to, give me Darrell Henderson. With the fact that he also knows this offense and this Rams team, there's a part of that. He definitely got more touches. I would rather start him over Royce Freeman here in week 8.
It's crazy to think that over the past probably like close to a year when Henderson was released by the Rams, was waived by the Rams last year. Whoa. He's like worked out for several teams. I think he was on the Cardinals practice squad at one point. And it's like teams have either had him on the practice squad or worked him out and been like, I don't know. Meanwhile, the Rams will bring him out on a Monday and be like, yeah, you're starting.
You're going to start for us
on Sunday.
Yeah.
Speaks to how weird running back can be in the NFL and why maybe teams don't want to spend $15 million a year on a back.
Real question though, and maybe you can't answer this, but like,
I'll try.
How much of this is just like we just have knowledge of that player?
That's
we
totally
know that they just get the system. We know they know a little bit.
It's trust. It's if we bring Henderson in,
we don't have to teach him as much.
Teach him a language,
yes.
right? It's like the Rosetta Stone he's already worked through his Rosetta Stone in the past. He'll be fine in the future. So my gap between these two backs is unfair. I have Henderson as RB24 and Royce Freeman as RB41.
Oof.
It shouldn't be that wide. I'm going to adjust this. I would rather not play either of them in a 10-team league. Bad matchup against the Cowboys.
Yep.
But
no teams on a bye.
Yep. Beyond that, though, Henderson had like a couple of differentiators last week. One, he fell into the end zone, which could have easily been Royce Freeman. 2, he had a little bit of passing game utilization.
Yes.
So at the beginning of the week, just to be consistent, we said we would prefer Henderson over Freeman if you had to choose one, but that gap should be a bit narrower there.
I'm with you on that one.
It just, the
He's
reason
going
why
to get touches.
And when I say narrower, it's going to be Henderson moving further down, not like, hey, he moves down and Freeman moves up. Because I still think with Freeman, given that he got 0 looks in the passing game last week,
right,
he needs to fall in the end zone to pay off.
Right. That's where it's tough against this Dallas Cowboys defense, too, because I don't feel super confident in either one of them here. I do feel confident, though, Field.
Yeah.
Alvin freaking Kamara.
Oh, by the way, I will talk about him in a second. Keith does alert me. Thank you, Keith. I'll respond to you verbally as opposed to over text. Thank you for this information. The Browns re-signed Jordan Wilkins and added Nate McCrary to the practice squad the other day. So they do have some
more bodies,
some backs in the backfield. I still think Kareem Hunt plays, but anyways.
I'm with you on that.
We talked about this yesterday.
Alvin Kamara, unreal. How do you? Here's the thing for me, and this is where it's tough. I have Alvin Kamara as a top 5 running back.
Yep.
It is so difficult to quantify his passing game usage. Well, it's not difficult to quantify it. It's difficult to understand how is this going to continue. This seems so unbelievably unsustainable.
Yeah, I mean, it probably is, but this is not Jerick McKinnon scoring a receiving touchdown every week.
It's not Gabe Davis getting 4 consecutive. Yeah, you're right.
What this is to me, though, is, and this will be relevant to the next part of the conversation, is this is me watching the Saints week in and week out, a team that I think has legit offensive talent, right? I mean, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara is a pretty good starting point, just those 2 players alone.
Yep.
Michael Thomas, healthy, sort of a weird but useful tight end room, right?
Rashid Shaheed, nice.
Rashid Shaheed's been an awesome big play threat for them.
Yep.
And yet when they play, they can't seem to figure it out other than having trouble blocking, can't get open down the field, dump the ball off to Alvin Kamara.
Yeah.
So until someone proves to me that the formula is going to be different, I'm going to gladly take Alvin Kamara as a lock-it-in top 2 running back for me this week. I don't do non-PPR rankings for ESPN. I wonder, though, if there's a way to calculate the biggest discrepancy between PPR and non-PPR ranks amongst running backs. I wonder if Alvin Kamara is the player. He's got to be very, very, I mean, maybe not very different. The projections might be much different relative to the rankings, though.
So I can tell you right now, so he returned in week 4.
Yep.
Missed the first 3 games because of suspension.
Okay.
Since week 4, Alvin Kamara has 86.8 PPR fantasy points.
Okay.
He has 51.8 standard fantasy points. So he's going from averaging 21 points per game to averaging 13 points per game.
Isn't that crazy?
That is unreal. You're getting 8 fantasy points just from the passing game usage as a running back.
It's off the charts.
It's unreal.
It's off the charts. Great.
You start him, you feel good about it. There's no questions there. The person that I don't feel good about is Chris Olave in this offense field. We know how good he is, but it has been very difficult, tough sledding so far. I'm at a point, and I'm not the only one, where there are a lot of fantasy managers trying to figure out, what do I do with Chris Olave? Do I hold tight? Do I try and move him? Yeah. What do you do if you're a Chris Olave manager?
I'm holding tight.
Okay.
Now, he actually had a decent game this past Thursday night, 7 catches for 96 yards. And remember how hot he started out of the gates. Right, it was like back-to-back-to-back games up over 100 receiving yards, or at least he averaged over 100 receiving yards in his first 3 weeks. And you were like, oh, yeah, this was the player that I could not stop salivating over during the offseason. And then the Saints' offensive roadblocks hit. And everything has been sort of a guessing game since then in terms of what you're going to get from Chris Olave. I mentioned how the Saints' offense right now is just basically, we can't block, let's just throw it to Alvin. After 10 days, because they had the Thursday night game last week. And it sounds like, if you've been following along with some of the stuff on Saints Twitter over the past 10 days, some difficult conversations. Like, there was some stuff that was aired publicly. There was a lot of conversation about a route by Chris Olave and a throw by Derek Carr and who's to blame, yada, yada, yada. I'm not smart enough to know the answer. What I do know is that I hope when a singular play is emblematic of general struggles, that it leads to people in the same offense saying, let's figure this crap out. And I'm hoping the Saints have figured some of this crap out. If they do, Chris Olave will not be wide receiver 20 in a week. He will be more like wide receiver 10 in my rankings. But until that happens, it's hard for me to move him much further up the ranks, even in a good matchup against the Colts. I love the player. Love him. It's my guy.
And I love the volume. Here's what he's had as far as targets.
Yeah, it's great.
10, 11, 11, and then the 2 back-to-back weeks that sucked, he had 6 and 5, and then the last 2 weeks, 10 and 15. He's had 10 or more targets in 5 of his 7 games.
That's absurd. You can't move a guy who has 15 targets in a game 10 days ago further down than wide receiver 20. So that only emboldens my stance that I would be holding steady or buying low on Chris Olave right now. That volume is like almost literally incomparable.
It's crazy. I need
That's
him.
absurd.
I need him to get some connections with that, but you will take that volume every day of the week. Let's talk about Green Bay's wide receivers. This one has been
I think you got the victory lap here, Daniel. Yeah.
Well, it's just been tough. It's been really tough for Christian Watson. The dude has been so good. Like, we know he is so talented, I should say. Yeah. But in this offense, I do not trust Jordan Love and that deep ball. In fact, I don't really trust Jordan Love at all in this offense, if I want to be honest.
Yeah.
But if I am trusting someone, it was kind of like I said at the beginning of the year, guys that are a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage to be able to give Jordan Love the ability to get the ball out quickly.
I think it's a good matchup against the Vikings, but they, like the Broncos, have started to play a little friskier on defense.
Yep.
We'll talk about the Broncos in just a moment here. There are some people that are much, much smarter than me that talk about quarterback play. And, you know, whether it's like, you know, Dan Orlovsky at our own shop here at ESPN, of course, has great breakdowns about quarterbacks. I saw a tweet from Kurt Warner yesterday, who, like, literal Hall of Famer, Super Bowl MVP, like absolute star, like great analytical mind about quarterbacks, tweeting about Christian Watson being like, what was he supposed to do this past weekend? Like, point to me, like, all these bad plays people are suggesting. I am never going to try to match wits with Dan or Kurt on football, specific to the quarterback spot. Okay?
Agreed.
But I can still have a lack of trust in Jordan Love in this offense in general, right? I can't speak to the nuances as much of his play as those guys can, but I'm with you. Like, it's hard for me to trust this offense right now, even in what seems on paper a reasonable matchup. I've got Watson as wide receiver 39, Romeo Doubs wide receiver 56.
So that's not great.
Not great at all.
And that's sort of where I'm at, too. I'm even out right now on the idea of wanting to start what I thought was going to be the safety blanket for Jordan Love, and that was Romeo Doubs. Jordan Love, bottom, 26 out of 32 quarterbacks in off-target percentage.
Gee, that sounds bad.
Okay, so that's not what you're looking for. Yeah. And where Jordan Love has been getting some fantasy value this year is with his legs. He has 21 rush attempts 130 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns.
Yep.
So you might look at it and be like, Jordan Love's not been doing too bad. I should probably be able to start as wide receivers. Pump the brakes on that one.
Yeah.
That has been a big part of it because this rushing has been elevating his floor to a point that don't let that confuse you and think that, hey, he's finding his wide receivers out there. He's off target. He is not looking great. That gives me a pause on all Packers wide receivers. Basically, anyone not named Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is the only guy that I'm starting, and even Aaron Jones needs to get it right because he's only had one startable week so far this year.
That was week 1, by the way.
That was week 1.
I'm with you. Like, I was eating crow for like a month at the beginning of the season. I was like, I can't see it with Jordan Love. And then it's like 3 touchdowns. 3 more touchdowns. I think 6 of his first 29 completions this year were touchdowns. That's absurd.
Ridiculous.
So he has come back down to earth for fantasy purposes. It's impacted the wide receivers. I would prefer to start none of them if I could.
Agreed. All right, let's talk about the Chiefs defense against these Broncos here.
Other way around, right? Chiefs offense?
Sorry, did I say? Sure, yeah, let's talk about this.
I mean,
Chiefs offense.
their defense is awesome. How's that for a take? Yeah, they've been great.
I might start the Chiefs defense against Denver this week if I need to. Patrick Mahomes, you're starting him this week.
Yes. Travis Kelce, starting him.
What about Isaiah Pacheco?
Starting him as well. Yeah. So here's what I would say. There isn't a huge topic storyline for the Chiefs that I am monitoring this week other than 2 small things. One is obviously you're starting the quarterback and tight end duo that is the standard for pass catcher and quarterback combinations in the NFL right now, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, along with Tyreek Hill and Tua.
Yep.
But was last week the start of the revenge tour for these guys? Or was last week taking advantage of an absolutely incredible matchup, and maybe this week facing off against a team that 2 weeks ago they played and didn't play that well against? It'll be a little bit more back down to earth because, again, it's not about our analysis is really not ever with Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. Are we playing these guys?
No.
It's more a reaction after the fact. Was using a 2nd or 3rd round pick on Patrick Mahomes a worthwhile investment? Because if he goes off for 25 points in the game, you say, good, it was worth it.
Yep.
If he has 16.5 points, you're like, crap, I could have started Geno Smith in the 12th round and gotten 16.5 fantasy points. Right? So that's really what I'm keeping an eye on. And then also Raheem Rice.
Oh, interesting.
So because everybody's playing for the first time, we mentioned this.
Oh, yeah.
No one's on a bye.
No bias.
Raheem Rice outside my top 30. But trending in the right direction and certainly passes the eye test in a major, major way.
I do want to say Isaiah Pacheco has looked awesome. If you waited and grabbed him as one of your hero RB, like your RB2s, he's been great. This is a great matchup for him. So
good. Yep.
I think Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce might be like 2 of the there's got to be a limited number of players that you're like, if they played against like the all-pro NFC defense.
Yeah.
Would you still play these guys against the best defense?
Yes.
Like, not just best defense in the league. Like, take all the best defenders.
Yes.
And, like, I'm with you. Like, Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes might be 2 of, like, 6 players that I'm like, you play them regardless of who they play against.
That's how it works. Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on who's my play caller and how much time do I have to design it. Both sides.
Yeah.
Like, do I get Bill Belichick as my defensive coordinator?
That's a great question.
And the Andy Reid's my offensive coordinator. So if you're on the Mahomes and Kelce side, you get Andy Reid. If you're on the defensive side, you get Belichick.
And is Taylor Swift in attendance at the game?
It's a good question as well.
See, there's a lot of context that
we need to answer variables to answer right there. Yeah.
Last thing real quickly on this. We didn't talk about it. I don't think there's a whole lot to touch on, but Mecole Hardman came back to this Chiefs team, had a really nice punt return.
Yeah.
Is there anything as far as like, hey, you know what? These Chiefs wide receivers have been hard to figure out. Maybe Mecole Hardman? I don't think so either. Just wanted to make sure.
Like, I feel like a Chiefs wide receiver is going to end up making Al Zeidenfeld at $150K some point this season.
Yep. When Kadarius Toney has that one game where he plays.
Yeah.
But I am with you. Raheem Rice is the guy that I've been trying to hammer home, even though he's not getting the volume that I want for him to get now.
Yep.
It is obvious that there is a connection that exists with him. And as you progress throughout the season, I want those high upside guys on good offenses on my bench for when they potentially turn the corner in the fantasy playoffs. Let's talk Giants.
Yep.
Outside of Saquon Barkley and Darren Waller, I'm looking at potentially one pass catcher here, and it would be Wan'Dale Robinson. He's the only wide receiver I would consider starting. And this week, maybe I haven't said this, but with no teams on a bye, I probably am not going to start Wan'Dale Robinson this week.
Trending up in some ways, but has yet to reach, he has reached 10 fantasy points in one game this season. So you're looking for upside. Fantasy is not the game where you get rewarded for showing up. This is the game in which you get rewarded for scoring the most points other against your opponent. Too? Play the Jets, obviously. And the Jets, both of their cornerbacks are progressing from the concussion protocol. They have not yet been fully cleared, Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed. But if you have those 2 guys in the field, the Giants would not be a team that I am looking forward to playing either any of their wide receivers.
Correct.
Saquon will be inside the top 10. He's been solid, of course. He is Saquon.
And Darren Waller, because of how bad the tight end position is.
He's been sort of a little bit better of late.
Yes,
that's been helpful. But yes, I would not be looking to play any Giants wide receiver.
I think I'm with you on that one, Field.
Yeah.
All
Jets-wise, I'm playing Breece Hall. And Garrett Wilson is like, well, Garrett Wilson, he's way too talented to not be played in a lot of leagues. I feel like there have been enough risers amongst the wide receivers that you could conceivably have a roster construction where you got Deontay Johnson and Jacoby Myers a little bit later in the draft than Garrett Wilson, and you might be picking 2 out of those 3, and you could talk yourself into Wilson being the odd man out.
I have
Myers, I think, would certainly be he's the lock of those 3, right? But Wilson inside my top 25 still.
I've got that very problem where I've got to decide between Nico Collins and Garrett Wilson.
Another good example of one.
And I never would have thought that I'd have been a week 8 being like Nico or Garrett Wilson, but that's where we are, man.
Yeah. CJ Stroud has been balling.
He's been so good.
So has Nico Collins, yeah.
By the way, let's say you were going to take one of these 2 wide receivers. We had this big conversation coming into the season.
Yep.
You going to draft Garrett Wilson or are you going to draft Chris Olave?
I know.
They've both been frustrating. Both of them are getting so many looks. I want both of them to get a better quarterback.
Yeah, I would still lean towards Olave rest of the season now, though, because even if Derek Carr is frustrating at times or has been frustrating recently,
he's getting the ball to him way more.
A lot more targets. And, I do think Derek Carr is a much more serviceable quarterback than Zach Wilson.
I'm totally with you on that one.
Zach, you get my respect over some of the things. I mean, they're 3-3. Like, if Tampa wins tonight, the Jets could move into second place, in the division with a win on Sunday.
Yeah.
So the Jets could be in this AFC playoff picture with a couple of things breaking their way this upcoming week.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable with how the season started.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing here, Field. Trade bait brought to you by IBM Watson X. This is players rostered in more than 60% of leagues who have busted for 2 straight weeks.
Ugh.
We're looking at Calvin Ridley.
So let me ask you this. Is 8.1 combined fantasy points over the past 2 weeks good or bad?
That is poor.
Okay, it's not good.
Not good.
Here's the question.
Yeah.
If you are a person who has Calvin Ridley,
yes,
I think you would be very much inclined to trade him away, right?
I agree, yes.
What are the signs, if you're not the person that has Calvin Ridley, that make you say, I want Calvin Ridley?
You know, being able to get him for cheap is basically it.
Yeah.
Because, he hasn't looked good. It's looked like Christian Kirk is that guy that Trevor Lawrence is locked onto right now.
Okay.
So, for me, if I'm going to grab Calvin Ridley, it's because I am doing really well this year. I'm 6-1, I guess. Or what is that what we would be?
Yeah, 6-1.
Yeah, 6-1, 5-2, one of those 2 things. And I'm looking.
You couldn't do that math fast because all your teams are 7-0. Just for those that are like, what do you mean? Why does he not know? Yeah.
I don't want to think about it. But that's the thing for me where it's like, unless I have a team that is just flat out dominating and I'm buying low, but even then, what is that manager, what am I going to give that manager where they're going to be like, yes, I'd rather move on from this high upside player for one of your 2 scrubs.
Okay. Off the cuff name game. You ready for it?
All right.
Who would you prefer, Calvin Ridley or, and I'll name the players, Nico Collins?
Probably Nico Collins.
Okay. I agree. Jordan Addison.
Okay.
I agree.
Jordan Addison.
Chris Godwin. I know.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, tough one, right?
Chris Godwin is getting targets within this. I think I might default to Chris Godwin still.
Okay. I would go with Chris Godwin too.
That's getting close,
really
though.
Close.
That's getting
DeAndre
close.
Hopkins.
No, I would rather have Calvin Ridley than DeAndre
I would agree
Hopkins.
there. Calvin Ridley. Cortland Sutton or Calvin Ridley. I know. He's scoring touchdowns, man.
I know. That's the thing. This is without Jerry Jeudy doing stuff in that offense, it kind of feels like Cortland Sutton has reestablished himself as that guy for Russell Wilson. So, right now, rest of season, I don't feel good about it, but I feel like if it were me, I would pick Cortland Sutton.
I know. It's crazy, right?
That's such a weird. I can't believe I just said that.
So just to give you a sense of where things have gotten to with Calvin Ridley, those are 5 names that I think after week 1 of the season, you would have said, yeah, you can trade me all 5 of those players combined for Calvin Ridley.
Right.
And I'll still have to think about it.
Yeah.
So fantasy football, man, I don't think the audience would like this. But I wonder if next year after week 1, we show up on Monday and just have caricatures of us in our chairs and we don't actually do a show.
And tell me more.
Well, so that way we don't say things in overreaction form.
Right. Okay.
That 2 weeks later, Calvin Ridley, hey, I told you guys during the offseason, or someone else, I told you that, or I was wrong that Calvin Ridley was the wide receiver that you didn't want. Like, I don't know.
I think about this every single time because like the week one overreaction that stands out in my mind the most. Is there one that you think of? Because there's one that I think of that's very clear to me.
I always think about this one. I'm going to screw up his name right now, but there was a Cowboys wide receiver in week one, probably 7 or 8 years ago. And I remember in the war room, it was like a battle to get him off of waivers. And he had like 5 catches the rest of the season.
So for me,
Ryan Fitzpatrick?
It's Sammy Watkins.
Oh,
that big 3 touchdown
Mr.
game.
Week 1, right?
Yes. And it's like there was a huge overreaction. Oh my gosh, did we miss on Sammy Watkins? He's finally going to start delivering.
Yeah.
Like that to me is one of like the epitome of sometimes you just got to take a breath, guys. Football is not played over 1 week. It's played over a full season for a reason.
I mean, last night as I was sitting there watching NBA games, literally 50 seconds into the Spurs-Mavericks game, I went to see if I could vote. I was like, can I bet Wemby for MVP?
For MVP right now?
He had a block, had a sweet pass, and I was like, is that too egregious? That's what happens at the beginning of these seasons.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to have the NBA back.
I'm so pumped. Fantasy basketball is in our lives, Field. I'm pretty
Although
excited
my
about
team,
that.
after there's been basically one night of games, I'm getting crushed by Camby. So I'm waving the white flag on the season.
Oh no, not after 1 week. That's not how it works.
No. One night.
Oh, one
basically.
night. That's right. You're right.
Like we had 2 games on Tuesday and I had 0 players going. So yeah, basically one night in.
First game having Joker on my NBA fantasy roster.
That must be awesome.
It was a triple-double.
I had the 13th pick, and I took freaking Trey Young, who scored a lot of points last night while missing basically every shot he took.
Yeah, oh, that's a
good win for the Hornets coming out of the gates last night.
All right, that's going to do it for us today, Field. We are out of time. Make sure that you check out the Squirrel Report coming out tomorrow on Friday. It is a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I really enjoy being able to do it. Go check that out on our YouTube channel here. For Field, my name is Daniel. We love you guys.
YouTube.com/ESPN NFL.
Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. Have fun watching Thursday Night Football. Put the right people in your flex spot. No Thursday night people in your flex, please.
Don't do that.
We'll see you guys tomorrow.
He's leaving? Save it for week 1 caricature next year. Look at that. That's how you go out and top right there, people.